Good morning, Giants. Bright and early this morning. I've got a message that I told a friend, a follower, a viewer, listener, however you want to say it, that I would do a video on crying. Um, Man, how many of you are crying lately and allowing yourselves to do that? Let me go into the research behind it and why we cry. And this is interesting to me. It kind of blows my mind a little bit. Um, Crying starts at an early age. As babies, we cry, right? And as we grow, we learn to regulate that crying. And so, if you think about it, and going back to the research on it, which is interesting, most of the research on crying hasn't started until 2018. Man, it looks like I've been crying. I haven't been crying, but maybe I will. In 2018, they started doing more research on humans. Most of the research done on crying was done on animals. Well, there's a distinction between animals and humans when it comes to crying. For humans, it's a social thing to cry. As children grow up and they cry, parents help them to learn to regulate that crying and understand where crying is appropriate. And, there's crying for sadness, there's crying for joy. And you can go back and look at kids and see that they cry for both. And so, what parents help them do if they're in a healthy environment is to understand where that crying is appropriate. And so, for social connection, it allows us to create a connection between humans. And so, when we see somebody cry, we start to have empathy, sympathy for them. It's interesting that crying regulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the autonomic nervous system, which is your digestion, your blood flow, your circulatory system. It's keeping that calm. And so in crying, what it does is it regulates that and brings it back to balance. Now, there was a study done where they put adults in a theater and had them watch a sad show, and they compared them against non-criers, criers with non-criers. And what they found was that initially the criers, actually their mood decreased after the movie. So they cried and they felt worse. But then over time, their mood went back to normal, and then it went above normal. And so they improved their mood by crying. And so even though crying might decrease your mood initially, once it hits regulation, it will actually go past that and bring your mood up. Man, when I was a kid, I remember being told to stop crying. But I also understand that maybe I wasn't regulating it in a way that was healthy. Usually my siblings would just yell at me and say, "Hey, stop crying." And they'd get mad, and which was fine. But then I stopped crying and stopped being emotional. What I've learned is that crying is actually a way to express connection between humans. It's also a way to regulate and reset my body. And so by crying, I can reset that sympathetic or that parasympathetic nervous system and get back to normal. We need to cry more. As adults, it's a way for us to connect with other humans, but also it helps us to get back into balance and get back into life. And if you're crying, cry. Life can get pretty hard. Sometimes we need to cry with others, and it's healthy because they can help us. There's a social connection that occurs when we cry with others. We bond with them. Think about it. It's a social tool for humans to interact with other humans. And as kids, we teach other kids how to use it properly so that they cry in the right situations and they use it to interact with other kids. If they overcry or undercry, there's underlying issues that we need to address. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I remember there was a gentleman that went to Vietnam that I was helping in sales, and he had no symptoms of PTSD for probably 50 years. As he got older, though, his brain started to deteriorate, and those blocks that he had kind of fell away. And he said it was crazy. Just out of nowhere, I'd start crying. I just couldn't stop it. And his emotions would just go to intense levels. And all the stress that he had felt from all that, Vietnam and the war was finally coming to the surface. He felt fine for most of his life, went through without any symptoms or issues, but as he got older, his body started to regulate, and those symptoms came back up. And to me, it seems like the body was trying to get back into balance. For all those years, it was blocking that, and now it was to a point where he could actually start to release some of that emotion. People with PTSD respond to crying different from people who don't have it. So people with trauma, if you hear a crying baby, for example, a person that's healthy would feel some sympathy and empathy and want to help calm that baby. There's a social connection there to help. A person with trauma or PTSD, that's going to drive them crazy. That's going to just set them off, and that noise is going to make them feel just intensely stressed. And so it's just going back to the basics of it. Is we keep telling ourselves not to cry. Oh, I shouldn't cry. I'm a bawling baby or whatever. The truth is, you should cry, and you should do it appropriately. You know, if a loved one dies, it's probably appropriate to cry. And your mood will drop, but trust that it will come back up to normal, and it will go up above normal. It'll go to a healthy state, and you'll heal from it. It's okay to cry when things are good, you know, to cry for joy. You know, it's not a bad thing to do that. It's okay to just cry. You know, as a man, we're told not to cry. I say no. We need to cry more. And so I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. I see a lot of people on this morning. Tell me what you think about crying. What were you taught about it? Got my alarm going off there. Share your thoughts. Share the video. Would love to hear your thoughts and insights. I'm going to jump off. I've got another video this morning at 9 a.m. We're doing an interview with Brett Borg from Schmidt's Pastry Cottage. That should be pretty cool. But I don't know, guys. It's these are hard times. These are interesting times. A lot of people are under distress. And so remember to take some time for yourself. Allow yourself to feel these emotions. Allow yourself to cry if you need to cry. And just know that it's okay. If you need to reach out, you need to have a conversation, let me know. You know how to do that. Message me and I'll do that. So you guys make it a great day, and I'll talk to you on the next video.